Okay, we're going to create our first song. We're going to start by creating 4 tracks. Make sure when you create your tracks that they are audio tracks. We are going to get into MIDI and instrument tracks later in this class. Drummer is a type of instrument track, and guitar and bass is a type of audio track. So we just want the plain audio track, create 4 of them, and I want you to label them lead, accompaniment, bass, and rhythm, like this. Once you've done that, I want you to select a tempo between 100 and 130. You can pick whatever tempo you'd like, 100 and 130, but we want to stay in that range for some particular reasons. I think I'll pick 110. Now I want you to open the mixer window, drag across or select all 4 tracks, and you're going to insert a frequency analyzer. In Logic, the best frequency analyzer is actually in the equalizer. So we're going to go ahead and put in an EQ. We can do that by clicking next to audio effects here, dragging down to EQ, channel EQ, and we'll put a mono one on. Because we had all the tracks selected, it put an equalizer on all 4 tracks. And you can see my voice coming through this one. And then later in the project, we will be doing some filtering, which would sound something like this, and you can hear as it gets darker and brighter, you can hear the changes on my voice, okay? So those are the 2 things we want to do. Now, in Logic, the equalizer does both. It has the frequency analyzer as well as a filter on the top. In your DAW, you may need to insert a filter and then the frequency analyzer after it. When we created these 4 tracks, we created the parts for our song. We have our lead, accompaniment, bass, and rhythm. Lead is going to be the high tonal sounds, accompaniment are going to be the mid-range tonal sounds, and bass are going to be the low sounds. The rhythm sounds are going to have a similar range. They're going to have high, mid-range, and low, but they're just going to be percussion sounds. There's not going to be any pitch associated with them. The next thing we want to do is to start putting sounds into our tracks. Most people find it easiest to start with the rhythm part. So I'm going to open the loops browser over here on the right, and I'm going to come in under instrument, and I'm going to select all drums and probably beats. Suggesting most of you stay away from the kits because those are real drum sets, and just in the EDM world at this point, the real drums are sounding a little outdated. So I would suggest staying with beats. Now, when I go look for a beat, what I want to hear is high, mid, and low frequencies, and those are hi-hat, snare, and kick. I want you to develop your ear and make sure that you can always hear a loop and whether it has those parts to it. If I click on this hi-hat loop, you hear that it's only the hi-hats, right? This one basically has no kick or hi-hat on it. Here's an example of a loop with no snare in it. It's a great loop. They're all great, but I want you to have kick, snare, and hi-hat in your loop because we're going to chop them up later. I'm going to pick this blueprint beat 3. A strange thing I want you to do is I want you to start these loops at measure 17. We're going to get into song form later, but right now we're trying to build the most dominant part of our song. So I'm going to drag that loop, and when you drag your loops in, make sure they are lining up with the vertical lines. If you start this loop before or after that line, your timing is going to be off with your song. All these loops that you import will either be 1 bar, 2 bars, or 4 bars. Okay, so if I drug, you can see this one here, it's a little bit longer, boss level beat 2. If I drug that in, it starts here and it lasts 4 bars. I want you to always start your loop on an even number, and in this case, we're going to start at measure 17. So make sure you start at 17. Now, I want that loop to last longer, so I'm going to click on it, and I hold down the Option key and then drag, and I can make a copy of that loop. Okay, so I want to make copies of that loop, and I want it to loop all the way up to measure 33. A shortcut for that on Apple is Command R, so I'm going to do, which stands for repeat. And I'm going to have my drum loops now repeating from measure 17 to 33. Then I'm going to cycle my song from 17 to 33. In Logic, you do that by clicking next to the measure and then dragging to the right, and you'll see a yellow cycle indicator going from 17 to 33. If I hit play now, my song starts at measure 17. And if it's playing here, it will loop back and start over. So now I'm listening to my track. Over here, I was listening to a preview of the loop. When I hit play now, I can go over and get the next instrument. If you are unsure if your drum loop has low, mid, and high, as in kick, snare, and hi-hat in it, you can open that analyzer and I'm just double clicking on this EQ right here. And when I hit play, you can see the frequencies that are being responded to by that loop. And you'll see that I have the bass here, the hi-hat here, and then when the snare hits, you'll see more movement here. Watch it. You can see the kick, snare, and the hi-hat coming in the offbeat. Okay. You should see that. If we look at the loop break free topper and we watch it through here, you see that there's no bass, no kick drum in it. You see that? We hear the snare and the hi-hat, but no kick. Okay. And lastly, this leaky faucet is an example of a loop that has the kick and the hi-hat, but no snare in the middle. Watch what happens here. You see how there's a big hole there in the middle? There's a little badoo that hits there, but it's not enough to hold down the groove. Okay, so if we go back to my original loop, you'll see that we have low, mid, and high, kick, snare, hi-hat. Make sure your loop has all those components. Now that we've added our rhythm part, we're going to add a bass part. So I'm just going to make these tracks a little higher by dragging this slider here and this one here. Now I can see 17 to 33. We're going to go over and we're going to look for a bass part now. So if I come over here, click instrument, click bass, and then I'm going to suggest that you click some sort of synthetic or more modern bass. The traditional ones will sound a little dated. Then you can hit play, listen to your drum track, and come over and click on your bass loops to audition them. Now, there's a couple things I want you to think about when you come over in this bass loop and look at it. One is, for something to be in the bass range, it means that the notes need to be from 100 hertz and lower, down to 20. So in this range right here, from 20 to 100, is where you're going to want to see the bulk of your information in a bass loop. Your accompaniment part is usually going to be 100 to maybe 500, and then your lead part will be somewhere between, 200 and 1,000, somewhere in that range. When I audition these bass parts, I'm going to be listening, and I can't see it on the equalizer yet. I'm going to be listening and trying to make sure that it actually has that low frequency information in it. A lot of the bass loops that are in applications right now have a lot of high frequency information in them, and that's cool for certain styles such as dubstep or trap where the bass is taking up most of the frequency spectrum. But for the song that we want to build with bass accompaniment and lead, we need to leave space up here for the other parts. In addition, a lot of the loops, the bass is playing way too many notes, which is not leaving space either. So we want to find a loop that doesn't have too much high frequency information nor too many notes and isn't holding notes too much. We need to leave room in both the frequency and the amplitude. Okay, let's start by taking a look at the stealth mode bass right here. And I don't know if you can hear when that loop is playing, but it has a lot of overtones and not a lot of bass. I'm going to drag it in here so you can see it. And then I'm just going to loop these two bars so you can just look at that one. You'll see it has a lot of frequency information right here and constant noise. And if we look at the waveform, we'll see that it is white pretty much the whole time across. There's not these gaps of blue in between. That means that this bass is taking up a lot of space, both frequency rise here and amplitude wise here. It might be a cool sound that we like, but it's going to cause problems when we go to build the rest of our song. So avoid basses that have too many notes and too many frequencies. Here's another one. It sounds pretty cool, but again, I've got some of the same problems, right? Let's look at it. This already has a lead part in it up here. You hear all that noise up there in these higher frequencies? That's not going to work with a lead and accompaniment part. It's going to take up too much sounds. Now, here's one that has a separate problem, stomping ground sub bass. Now, everybody likes a sub bass, but watch what happens when I play this. You probably can't even hear this on the computer you're listening to because the frequencies are so low. You see that down around 30 hertz, okay? It has no overtones in here, and what we've done is we've created a bass frequency now that no one can hear unless they have 18-inch subwoofers or the really good headphones I have on. So now we've gone to the other extreme. We've had a bass that had too many frequencies. Here's a bass that doesn't have enough. See if you can find something in between. Stone Cold bass, this one has too much high frequency in it. See all those high frequencies? This is an accompaniment sound. This is not a bass sound. Here's an example of a bass with way too many notes and way too much noise. You see how white it is? Our song is done at that point, right? We can't add anything to it, which is what we're trying to learn how to do. Here's one that has a reasonable amount of notes in it and frequencies. Let's take a look at the frequencies. You'll see that most of it is down here below 100, but we do end up with a little range up here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go with that sound right there. Sounds like I'm a Burning Man or something. And then I'm going to go ahead and repeat or duplicate that bass all the way across to 33. Okay, after we've put in the bass, why don't we jump up to the lead? We'll put in the lead and then we'll fit the accompaniment in behind the lead in a second. Okay, so we've got our underlying groove or bed going, and then we're going to add in the highest frequency we can. One of the easy ways to find a lead is to type in lead and see if you can find something that will be in the higher frequencies ranges. And when I'm saying that, we're looking for frequencies up here and lots of noise up above it. We want this one to be our highest, noisiest sound. And generally, it's going to have the most notes and the most sustain to it. And by sustain, I mean there's going to be the most white. There's going to be notes are going to be held for longer. Let's take a look at some leads and see how they line up with our bass and our rhythm. Okay, I started out with a pretty good example of a lead right here. You'll see that it has longer notes that are held out. If I bring it over into, this is a very high lead, okay? You'll see all those high frequencies and the notes are between 500 and 1,000, 500 hertz and 1,000. Okay. This is leaving a lot of room. I've got a lot of room here for my accompaniment part, okay? I kind of like that one, although I'm sick of it because I've heard it many times from Logic. Let me step through a few more here and maybe we'll go back to the one. So I just drug it to the side here. Okay, this happens a lot in the class. And what I've done is I found an accompaniment part right here. It says Ultra Pop Synth Lead, but what you're going to notice is that there's a lot of frequencies down here between 100 and 300, and that's the accompaniment range. See all that? This is an accompaniment sound, and I can prove that for you because I can move it to the accompaniment and I can bring this lead back over the top, and this will fit over the top. Listen. I'll turn this down a little bit. I hope we can hear that this one is much higher than this one. So watch out for things that say lead that aren't really leads. There's a lot of accompaniment sounds in there. In addition to the frequency of this loop right here being too low, you'll see that it looks more like a rhythm track. You see how the envelopes are short and regular, meaning they're happening at regular intervals in the rhythm, and our bass, which is fairly rhythmic. Now this ultra pop synth quote unquote lead is like that too. This is a very rhythmic sound. Rhythmic, repetitive sounds start to go into the background. They don't make the best lead sounds. A lead sound is something that's going to grab and hold your attention, and it mimics the human voice. If you look at this yearning synth lead, you'll see that the envelopes are longer. You see that? And they're more like phrases where there's gaps in between these longer phrases. This is going to hold the listener's interest better than this. This will drift off in the background. So this ultra pop synth lead, I would call that an accompaniment part. Now I can go through a few more leads here. This is another good lead because it has lots of noise and quite a few notes with a break in the phrase. If someone was talking, they could almost say that ba 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 da ba 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 ba, and that little break right there would be where they would take a breath. The lead is mimicking the human voice, which comes in sentences, right? We have a sustained sound, we have these sentence phrases, and when we pause and start back up, it's very hard to not listen to it. Okay? And this one's very consistent, but it's noisy and high, isn't it? And that's going to hold your attention. I've never heard this one before, and I think I might use it. It's a little, like I said, it doesn't quite have the phrases. Okay, so I'm going to grab that one and stick that in. And you see that's a much longer loop there. So maybe these are new longer loops that Logic has. hear that it's just repeating this second half, right? A little bit different. This is a pretty wandery lead sound, and not nearly as repetitive as some of these others. I'm going to hold on to that one too, and let's see if we like it. So I'm just going to drag it over here, kind of keep it for later. Okay, here's another example of a lead that we can run into problems with, and that is the lead that gets too repetitive. If you look here, this lead is only 2 bars long, whereas this one was 4 bars long and this one was 8 bars long. Okay, by being so repetitive, if I were to play through my track, it's in the right range. It sounds cool for the second time. Third time, something better happened here. And I'm concerned that it's getting overly repetitive. So one of the things to be careful is that your lead is not too repetitive. Now we could edit that later and make it interesting. In fact, I'm getting kind of attached to that one. And I think I maybe use that one. Let's see here. And you hear that Logic does a good job of making these sound good together, right? I mean, I could pretty much just play this one, go into the yearning synth lead, and then to this one. I hope you can hear as I'm playing how the bass and the drums, or the bass and the rhythm part, disappear into the background, right? We're holding interest to that lead. I'm going to try just a few more here. Here's a common example of an overly repetitive lead. If I look at this one here, it's a little low in the frequency, but it still works. The problem is it's pretty much a rhythm part, right? It just keeps repeating the same notes over and over. And by here, we're done listening to it. We only made it 4 bars before the listener's ear is like, okay, I've heard enough of that sound. So you want to find a lead sound that is not too repetitive. I've kind of got the two extremes here. This one was very non-repetitive, and this one is very repetitive. Step through a few more here. Here's an example of a loop that is too low in the frequency and too repetitive. Let's take a look there. This is a good accompaniment sound. You see that? Too low. And he keeps playing notes so often and so repetitive. You can see that the idea of the phrase that we're seeing in this loop right here, right? How it goes for a while and then takes a break. This one is not just note, no, 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 which makes it sound more like a drum track. Here's another thing to watch out for is to make sure your lead isn't too high. If this lead I have right here is all above 1000 hertz, right? Which makes it start to sound like it's over the top of something. In fact, I could probably put that above a lead sound. Make sure that your leads aren't too high. I hear that a lot when people are grabbing like bell sounds and stuff like that. Be real careful with the bells. They're really high. One of the main problems I usually will hear is something like this. This loop right here, if you listen to this, is too repetitive, but it also has a lot of the other parts in it. It already has bass accompaniment and lead into it. Let's listen. See all that bass frequency down there? Mid here. And high frequencies here. This is the worst kind of loop you want to stay away from because now you can't edit and do anything with it. It's already got too much of the information in it. Okay, well I think I found my lead. I think I like this one. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat that. And now I'm going to go look for an accompaniment sound, okay? So in the accompaniment sound, ideally I would be looking in between. Here's my lead. Here's my bass. And if I go to my accompaniment, I'm going to be looking for something in between those. Let me go ahead and stack these right over so you can see them all next to each other, okay? So I see my bass down here below 100. I see my lead up here above 500. So I got this whole range between 100 and 400, or 100 and 500, to look for an accompaniment part. What can I do to find an accompaniment part? I can start thinking about these sort of instruments that play accompaniment. Piano, a lot of synthesizers, electric piano, organ, guitars, vibes, those sort of things will be playing in the background often. Strings, right, too? Let me try a few of those. Other things you might want to search for are words like pad or pluck, and we'll talk about those more later in this class because we're going to be creating our own. Let's just see what happens if we put some of these pads in. Pads are long, slow sounds in the background. You see they have a lot of white there. You see that? Let's just look at the frequency range of that one and see where it comes here. It's a little high, you see that? It's interacting with that lead quite a bit. Okay, and that's going to cause us a little bit of problems there. It's not bad. You can hear it sounds okay, right? But it's got some lower notes here, but it's interacting too much up there. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and not use that one. Here's a pad that sounds lower. Let's see how this one looks. Yeah, you see all those frequencies down there? In terms of frequency response, this is a very good fit. It still has a lot of information right there, maybe a little bit too much in the lead. Another word you can look up is pluck. Now here's an example of a pluck, but if you look at this, it's above my lead part. Look at this. Look how high that is, right? I would love it if your ears could hear that without having to look over here at these frequency spectrum. You see that? So that actually fits in pretty well, but again, it's above the lead, which is a little weird, right? I want to try to keep my accompaniment below my lead for right now. And I'm noticing a lot of the plucks are very high in frequency. I'm going to try just maybe some synth sounds. Let's see how these sound. Anytime you see bell, it's probably going to be very high. Look how high this bell is. See that way up there? Look at those frequencies. Be careful with bell. It's also not the best lead instrument because it's actually a percussion instrument. So it's very high, but it won't hold attention well. Okay, here's one that caught my ear. It's called Ocean Deep chord stabs. You'll see that there's quite a bit of information here. It's still got a bit in that range. Most of the notes, if I pause here, you can see it. You know, the bass is down here. I've got my accompaniment here and my lead here. I'm going to go ahead and go with this sound. Now, there's a couple other things that are good about it. Remember that we're looking at frequency, but we're also looking at amplitude horizontally. And if you look at this, you'll see that there's quite a bit of blue here. I want space in this song. I don't want a whole bunch of noise going on in this. It's kind of got a chill sound to it. And we're going to start to introduce the idea of counterpoint, which means that when this one is not playing, this one is. You see how the note right here is playing and there's that gap right there? That's great stuff. That's how we start to fit different sounds together. We put one sound in the gap of the other sounds, and we'll call that counterpoint. We'll talk about that more future in the class. So let me just save that one for a little bit and let's just see what else we got here. This is a lead sound, very high and noisy. That one's a little too much in the same frequency range. Here's another one very similar to the one that I previously picked. In fact, this one is probably, in terms of the frequency range, the best one. You see that? The bass, accompaniment, lead. This makes life real easy for the mixer and the listener. Why don't I go ahead and do that one? Now you should be able to hear all three parts right there. You can hear that lead, you can hear that accompaniment, you can hear the bass. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And when you save it, I want you to save it as a package if you're saving it in Logic. And then what I'm going to ask you to do for most of your assignments is to upload a screenshot. To upload a screenshot of this, what I'd like you to do for this song is, you can close these if you like. I want to see measure 17 through 33. You're going to hold down Command Shift 4 on Apple and hit the space bar, and it will take a picture of that window, and then you're going to upload this picture that looks just like the Logic thing into your session. The other thing you have to do is you have to bounce the track down. So you're going to go to File, bounce. In other applications, it might be export. You're going to bounce your whole project or session, and you're going to bounce it as an M4A if you can, an MP3 if you have to. So in Logic, you're going to come here, you're going to check M4A, click it, bit rate is fine right there. Make sure it's bouncing from 17 to 33, hit OK, and then you're going to save that bounce as song 1. It will show up on your desktop. And then you will upload that file from your computer.